When you design a building, instead of like an architect or an engineer, they create what are called design documents. They say, here's how it's supposed to be built. And they give those to contractors, and the contractors build the building. And then they create what are called as-builts, which are how we actually built the building. And the difference between the two of those things is the fog of war that is construction.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. I'm your host today. My name is Brett Gilliland. And as always, I have another amazing business owner who is a real business owner who's got real lessons learned from real experience and who has real challenges still that we can talk about on our show together. Ian Hoppe is my guest today. Ian is the founder and CEO of Condoit. Condoit is a software that helps electricians catalog the electrical systems that they're working on site and do it in a way that's easy, much easier than the pencil and paper drawings that Ian himself had to do for many years out in the field. So I want to welcome Ian to the show. Ian, thank you for being here today. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Really thankful you had me on here. This is great. Good opportunity.
All right, so I would love for you to give a little context to Condoit, help people understand better than I did what you guys are trying to do at Condoit, how you help electricians, and then we'll jump into the meat of our interview.
Yeah, so I come out of the field. So I was an electrician. My whole family are all electrical people. So engineers and electricians, back a couple of generations, actually, it kind of runs in the blood. My dad's a power systems design engineer. So I was like 14 and he was like, you're working this summer. So I spent all my summers and breaks as an electrician's apprentice, really fell in love with the trade, graduated when I worked offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, kind of heavy oil and gas stuff for several years, followed that over to Texas, up to the Dakotas, Alaska for a little while, which is a whole other story. Worked in Chicago until it got really cold and I was like, I'm going to go back south. So I came back down to Birmingham, which is where we're based now, went to school for electrical engineering, went to go work for an electrical engineer. And what I was doing when I was working for the engineer was doing data collection about real world electrical systems. So try to figure out how stuff is actually put together out there. When you design a building, instead of like an architect or an engineer, they create what are called design documents. They say, here's how it's supposed to be built. And they give those to contractors, and the contractors build the building. And then they create what are called as-builts, which are how we actually built the building. And the difference between the two of those things is the fog of war that is construction, right? But as time goes on, both of those documents get more and more out of date, particularly in large, complex electrical systems, hospitals, industrial plants. They're constantly renovating stuff, they're changing things. And all those records, literally, most of the time, get stacked on a table somewhere as individual projects. There's not any central understanding of what's out there. And this is a very big problem in like a hospital when you're laying on the OR and you realize that nobody quite knows how to turn this light off that's over your head, right? And that's a huge problem. So that's what I was out there doing, is trying to get a snapshot. And the process was usually me walking into the maintenance director's office and going, hey man, where are your as-builts? And he'd be like, I got some old drawings, like good luck. And I would start where the power company hits the side of the building, and I would trace this cascade of electrical equipment over many floors and many buildings and draw it by hand on a big sheet of paper and take hundreds of pictures with my phone, and then go back to the office, redraw it in AutoCAD, put it in analysis software to crunch numbers around the system, and then build a report, print it out, take it back to the maintenance director, and he'd put it under his desk and never think about it again. So huge waste of data and time and resources. So back in 2019, I started building a tablet application that walks somebody through the collection of electrical system infrastructure, validating what they're putting in, making sure it's correct and complete, and saving it in the cloud. You get this digital record and this real world system. And as this one changes, you can update this one. And next time an engineer walks in here and goes, hey, where are your as-builts? You share this record with them. So that's what we started building. We started that in 2021, getting to market. And in the last couple of years, we've found a tremendous amount of traction in the EV charger installation space and electrification more broadly. Because it turns out behind the installation of every single one of these chargers going to every parking lot in the world over the next 10 years is an electrician standing there with an out-of-date record of this facility trying to figure out how to fit this new stuff into a 1970s electrical system nobody kept track of. And that's what we help with. So we've really focused on that. Like I said, we started in 2019, 2020, went through Techstars, raised a couple rounds since then. Now I got a team of 12, and we just closed a $4.25 million seed round.
Well, congratulations on the growth and the progress and the belief from somebody out there that said, hey, we'll cut you a check. We want to see this thing go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about what you've learned over those 5 years. Let's call them, five fast-moving years. You've learned a lot, and you went from you and maybe a relatively small team at first to, now you've got a power team of 10, 12 people, and there's a transition that has to happen for you to go from the person who knows everything about the electrical world and has this vision for what the product could be, to now you're building a team and you're building a business, and that transition trips a lot of us up. And so we're here to share some lessons learned along the way. So what has been maybe the most important or most useful lesson for you in that transition personally that might be useful to other business owners?
So I've heard this in two different ways, and this is something I've been struggling with literally in the last just few months. So originally, I was hearing it from my pre-seed investors, and they were saying you've got to go from working in the business to working on the business, and that's one way I've heard it. I just recently, so my new CTO, I hired him about 3 months ago. He was the founding engineer at Venmo. Then he went on to create. He founded two other pretty major fintech startups and sold them off to Goldman Sachs and a couple others. So he's done this a bunch of times. He's made this transition. He's built these guys. He's worked with CEOs and founders, and he himself was one. And the way he put it was, you are now the orderer. So you are now the customer, is the way he put it. Is you come to us and ask us to do things and expect that it gets done. And for me, that's a very new concept. Because usually it was, hey, we all need to get this done, and then I'll just go do it, and like bounce it off everybody. And recently, in the last few months, I've done that. I've done that a couple of times, and it's made people mad because I'm stepping on toes. I'm doing other people's work, and I've got to kind of get out of the weeds a little bit. And my new investors have helped, and my new CTO have really helped. Like, stay out of the way, make sure we don't run out of money, and find the right team. And I've been trying to keep that in my sight. Yeah, and we're I'd say doing a B- on that so far. I'm doing a B- on that. Getting better every day though.
Yeah, progress, not perfection, right? That's
Right.
that's what's needed there. So we didn't talk about this before we hit record, but I have a view of the world that says a seven-figure business owner has to figure out how to keep these three hats and get rid of all the rest. And the three hats are: set the vision, so get that clarity of focus, build the team, and get the resources. That sounded very familiar to what you just said. So it's like the get out of the way part. Yes, once you're sure that everybody's aligned, right? We got a clear vision. We're all moving the same direction. Then we're going to build the team and make sure that the team has the resources they need to get it done. So, couldn't agree more. Love the focus though of or that framing of I'm a customer now. Like I'm submitting my order, and I want other people to fulfill that in the form of leadership in my business. Like, they're going to take care of it, and that's pretty cool. Like that. Okay. Um, I'm sitting here thinking we have time for another lesson. If you have another lesson that you'd like to share, we have time for another one. If not, I'm more than happy to shift to the more, the more meaty topic of wrestling with the challenge that you're dealing with.
Yeah, let's shift.
All right, let's shift. So before we hit record, we talked about something that might be useful for you and your business, and that should be helpful for others. Why don't you tee that up in a way that makes sense for you, and then we'll go from there.
So we've got at least one team member. So like I said, I used to kind of do everything. I was head of sales, head of marketing, head of product, in a way, head of engineering, and everything kind of rolled up to me, and I kind of made all decisions. And in fact, spent a lot of weekends, writing test code. So I was just kind of all the things. I led all the sales calls, I did all the demos. And as I've made this transition that we were just talking about from doer to customer, I've had to really I'm having to really start setting expectations for my team. Very clear expectations with, what I initially did was set monthly goals, and in particular for sales and marketing, and how we're going to get to them. And I came with this plan, and they were all like, go to hell, man. Like, that's our job to make the plan. And I was like, okay, get me here. Get me to this number by this date, and into the year is what I told them. And they struggled with that pretty hard, and I eventually got it out of them. The plan, the sales plan, sales and marketing to get to that side. And we're not really hitting those goals that they set. Those month-over-month goals. And I'm struggling with what to do about that. I've been coached, and like you said a moment ago, find talent. So, and my new investor calls it. He's like, you're a first time founder. You're really good in your field. We just need to surround you with badasses. That's like his, like, find great people. Find people that know what great looks like. You know.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what I'm kind of struggling with now. The folks that I have on the sales and marketing side are, some of them, dear to me. Have been working with us for years. Uh, One in particular has been, I mean, he's almost like a brother. We're just not hitting the goals, and I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know how to get there. I could read a book and make up some stuff, but I haven't done this before.
Yeah.
And I can't. I don't. There's not really a circumstance where I can. I also have limited budget and limited time,
Right.
and I don't have
Right.
time to learn on the job. So there's just a lot of things I'm fighting with here, and not quite sure which direction to go.
Well, let me play it back for you to make for understanding, and then just to tee it up for people. What I hear you saying is we're in territory we've never been in before with people sometimes, and it's not specific to sales and marketing, it could be any function, but with people who haven't been at this place either, but I've entrusted them, and I feel a lot of loyalty to them. They've been with me from the start, and they've given a ton of their blood, sweat, and tears. Right? They've invested fully. Um, Even if we don't even have to talk about equity here, but they've just been committed, loyal team members. They've done whatever you've asked, and now we're at this place where the needs of the business might start to outpace their knowledge, their domain expertise, right? Their knowledge of that function and ability to go make the next thing happen. Am I catching this right? Does this sound right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then you have the sticky situation as the founder. And by the way, you mentioned, well, I congratulated you that you just took on some investor money. You got some fuel for growth, but with that money comes some intensity around the expectations on the time frame for a return, right? They're like, okay, this is the time frame, and you sold us on this plan, and so now you've got some outside influence, some pressure that comes with taking on external money. So I think I understand all of that very well. Um, so let's just have a conversation about some concepts that I hope will be helpful to you. So there's some framing that we use when we talk to business owners to help them understand the stages of business. And every business goes through these stages. And you may be familiar with similar models, even if you don't know or agree with ours completely. But the idea is, hey, to go from 300,000 to a million in, let's call it ARR. Are you guys measuring monthly or annual for your business?
Annual.
Annual, okay, ARR. Okay, so for everybody else out there who's not familiar with SaaS, a software as a service kind of business, ARR is annual recurring revenue, and that is the thing in a recurring revenue business like a software as a service type of business. You're driving annual recurring revenue or monthly recurring revenue, and that is the main metric for that type of business. So um, your goal is to drive a certain amount of revenue through that business, and you have team members who may or may not know what it looks like. What is the normative model to go from where you are to where you're trying to go? There is kind of a way to do that work, and some of your team won't be familiar with that because they don't know. But these stages that I was talking about are on the ones and threes of revenue. So if you went from 300,000 to a million in ARR, there's a set of things that you figure out and you learn at that stage of business. Then from 1 million to 3 million, you're tripling again. There's a stage of business there that has to be figured out. 3 million to a 10 million, 10 million to 30, 30 to 100. Um, I was part of a SaaS business for a while, and in a 10-year span, we went from seven figures to 100 million. And we went through all these stages. And at every stage, you have this little growth spurt, and everything's good. And then you start to level out, and you kind of hit a plateau. And that's the point where you either get stuck or you do the work necessary to shift gears and go to the next stage, that next tripling. And it's not like precise, right? It's not exactly at 1,000,001 cent, right? It's roughly at the ones and threes of revenue though. And it kind of tracks logically. It's like we tripled what our machine is outputting. Now it's time to upgrade the machine to do the next leg of the journey. There's
Mhm.
actually some organizational, um, I guess, what I would call development stages that coincide with those revenue marks. So up to about 1 million, you got, let's say you have six or eight people or something like that. You're involved in lots of things. From 1 to 3, you got to start doing this change that you're talking about, where it's like, okay, now I got to get out of I got to become the customer or the leader, and I got to get out of the day to day. From 3 to 10, if you haven't built a really strong functional leadership team before then, that's like you really got to hit that by the time you get to 10 million. If you don't have a strong executive team, you're going to have a hard time going any further. So at, at these revenue stage change points, there's also some organizational development things that need to be happening. So that's all background, Ian, for what I'm going to share now. It was uncommon in our experience of growing a SaaS company through these stages. It was uncommon in our experience for many people, aside from the founders. Somehow, founders have this ability to go multiple stages, many of them. Um, but a lot of the original people or the leaders that you put over certain functions have a hard time growing more than a couple stages. So if you had people with you from early on and they got you through those early stages to 1 million or maybe even 3 million, ARR, those folks don't know what it looks like to go from 3 to 10 or 10 to 30, right? They don't. That next leg of the journey is foreign to them. They've never been there. And so what we wrestled with the same thing, and the real wrestle is, but the fact that they don't know what the next leg of the journey looks like doesn't make them less valuable or less important to me. I love having them on the team, and they're extremely knowledgeable. They know my business inside and out. They like I want them around. And so
Right.
here's the trick. Many of those folks, especially if you've given them titles like, I don't know, let's say you created a product director or something like that in the early days, and then you have to bring in a quote unquote real director of product when it's time to be at a higher stage. Um, they're not the right person. They're ill equipped to take the product where it needs to go later, but they could stay as a valuable team member were it not for the ego piece for themselves. So if they're like, you know what, I got to bring in a director of product that can help us at this next stage, I think you'd be really valuable here. And I'd love to see you play this kind of role if you can carve out a role that makes sense and then fits in your budget. But a lot of times they have a hard time taking a step back if by their job title that said director of product and now you're bringing in a director of product and they need to be something different than that or in their mind lesser than that. That can be a real ego hit for a lot of those people who were with you early on. So I don't know all the players that you're dealing with, but some of them can make this change. I've seen it happen where some of them can say, no, the organization needs somebody who knows how to take this function forward, and I can still contribute in a meaningful way. And they stick around, and they have, many years of service longer still that they're there. But the ones who kind of get tied to that, like, well, I was the product leader, and now you brought in, your real quote unquote CTO that has all the experience and if they have a hard time with somebody coming in above them, then it doesn't work out so well.
Mhm.
Let me pause there for a minute, Ian, because I want this to be helpful for you. So why don't you either comment on what I've shared so far or ask clarifying questions or redirect me to a different place?
Yeah, I think so. You're absolutely kind of talking about where we are as a company, and it's always interesting. I sit up at night struggling with this stuff and like wondering what I should do, and it's such a common experience.
It's so common.
And it's so common. Like it happens in every company. And I'm just like, oh, this is so singular. But yeah, so we're struggling with it, and I- you know, for those that are not comfortable with having somebody come in between, yourself and them. Um, what like what's a good way to have that conversation? And then what are some tactics for either getting them over that hump and keeping them around, or giving them like a nice soft exit plan
Yeah.
that is not going that's not because it's not like get out of here, you're not doing good work.
Right.
So it doesn't
Totally.
need to be firing like that. But we've got to make some changes, and this is like this is what we come down to. Like what are some tactics there, like in the event that you find yourself in that second circumstance?
Yeah. So um, education is our friend in this case. It doesn't always help with like feelings or ego challenges, but to sit down with somebody and say, "Hey, I'm starting to see that what we're experiencing isn't unique." It turns out, and it's not just unique to SaaS businesses, by the way. I work with all kinds of businesses in lots of industries, but this pattern on the ones and threes of revenue is a real thing. And it's really just that the machine we built is maxed out at what it can do, and until we change some combination of people, processes, systems, maybe product sometimes has to be upgraded, until we change some of these key inputs, we're not going to be able to move to the next level. And so a fun phrase that may or may not be useful to you, Ian, is our business or our organization is perfectly designed to get the results we're getting. Right? That's like master of the obvious types of phrase. That's a thing we could throw out there, but it helps me get really grounded sometimes. Like, oh yeah, I got to remember we're perfectly set up today for the results we're getting. When I'm frustrated with results as a business owner, I can't look at how I've created this thing and blame anybody else but me for how this is going. Right? So to help my team members understand, hey, there's this thing where businesses often grow and then they start to hit a point where they plateau, they max out what the current thing can do, and some combination of breakthrough on technology or product or people who have next level experience to come in. One way to try to keep a current team member longer and engaged in the seat is to bring in some fractional help. There's lots of fractional leaders now. There's like fractional revenue leaders and fractional product leaders and fractional marketing leaders. So you can bring some of that expertise in without displacing the current team member, but there's some cost involved with bringing some outside help. But then that outside help could help to level up your current team member to keep going a little bit longer, maybe another stage, another full stage. It just depends on how growth oriented your current team members are. Like, will they do the work to keep learning and growing? But yeah, throwing the next level of goals at them and just hoping that they're going to figure it out with their current tool set, their current framing, that usually doesn't work out so well. And then you start down this path of regret where you're like, man, I probably should have taken action earlier. Like the business is suffering later because I didn't take action sooner. Um, so yeah, practically speaking, I would bring them in and teach them about this very common ones and threes of revenue, especially as you start bringing in like executives. We didn't talk about where your revenue's at, but let's just say you're on this 3 to 10 million journey. Um, if if you know when you hire somebody in at 3 million, say, look, I'm aware that at 10 million there's a new stage from 10 to 30 million, and that you may not have that experience. So let's just acknowledge that over the next X period of time that you're here, we're gonna do the thing from 3 to 10 million, and I'm going to be encouraging you the whole way, and I'll support you however I can to develop into the person that can take us from 10 to 30. But let's not either one of us be surprised if we have to have a conversation someday that says we need the next person who can come in and take us from 10 to 30. Like, this is so common that I would start seeding that
Right.
conversation right when I bring people in, even in the future.
Now that that you framed it this way, I can also. It's also comforting isn't the word, but it's also part of the conversation. I think that the type of person that could take it from $3 to $10 million is not the type of person that can take it from 0 to 300K.
That's right. Or from zero to
300.
3 million. I mean, if that person's helped you do this, like, that's
Yeah.
awesome. You know?
Yeah, it doesn't go in. Like, it goes in both directions. Like
Yeah.
the type of person that I need right now would not have been good in the trenches a year and a half, 2 years ago. When we had, $200,000 in the bank account.
Yeah, probably
And
not. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so it's worth noting that that's a really important piece.
Yeah. And often founders are able to like break that pattern because they're so committed. They tend to be the people that are completely, I mean, they're learning from the start, right? They learn and do, and then they hand off to somebody else, and then they learn and do. I know founders that are able to go multiple levels, but I also know founders who are like, they hit their point and they're like, I'm not having fun anymore. And what they end up doing, the ones that are really good at certain stages, they build their business up to that stage, they exit, and then they do it again, right? And they just keep doing it. And you hear this term serial entrepreneur because they know how to
Hmm.
grow the thing to 1 to 3 million or whatever, and then they hand it off and then they go do it again.
Right.
But yeah, it happens in lots of cases, in lots and just about every role.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so practical ways to talk to him. You want to talk to him about the stages. It sounds to me like you're not going to have any problem expressing how meaningful it's been, that like their contribution and the relationship that you have with them. Like that's not going to come hard for you. That's going to be the easy part. But the hard part is helping them start to see and hear in your language that I think for the future of Conduit and all of our customers and now our investors, like we need to be able to bring people in who have a little bit of been there, done that on these stages. And I'm willing to try to do that with some consultant help or fractional help and see if you can get there. But if you can't get there in the timeframes that we need, like I have to make adjustments. Like I'm even more obligated today now that I said yes to, X millions of dollars that we just took on. So um, that's your fiduciary responsibility now. It's not just what you wanted to do as the business owner. Now it's like I'm obligated to do everything I can to make this happen. And
Hmm.
so what I'd like to do is start planting the seed that if it's not going to work out for you to be the leader of that function, in whatever function we're talking about, it's not going to be okay for you to be the leader of that function. Is there a way for us to still find meaningful ways for you to contribute that still excite you and that the business can afford? Because if I bring in somebody else to lead this, like all of a sudden I got two salaries there, and if we don't see the production lift fast enough, I can't afford to have both of those people on a relatively small team. So
Right.
you just start to get very real with them, and again, Ian, everything I've heard from you is like, man, I'm loyal to this guy or these people, right? And I
Right.
want to see them do well, and I want to see them stick around if at all possible. But they have to know, and you need to reinforce for your own brain that if a change needs to be made, here's how we'll know, right? Here are some of the decision factors, and you can kind of enroll them in that process. If you see them starting to turn south as a result of you being open with them, I not that it makes it any easier, but the path becomes more clear. It's like, okay, I guess this
Right.
isn't going to work. But if they can
Right.
stay engaged, you can certainly create a soft landing path for them that has them helping you onboard that next leader and you helping them find their next thing where they can thrive. And by the way, you're
Hmm.
not going to help them find something for the next stage. You're going to help them find something where the company's at a lower stage and that they can go in and kill it, right? Because they know what it looks
Right.
like. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Um, yeah. Great input, man. And I like the idea of kind of taking it out of and if somebody is invested and understands and is deeply committed and is working in the business all day, every day, they see this stuff. They understand.
Yeah.
Some
And,
on some level, whether or not they want to admit it to themselves, like they understand that like they're just not quite the person to get to the next level. And I think um, a lot of what you're doing is asking them to admit that, and it's a hard thing to admit, but it is one that something you have to address in the event that you're
yeah.
running a business like this. You know.
Yeah. And I know you were struggling to use that word comfort or taking comfort in the fact that this isn't unique to us, but I hope that a team member on the other side of this conversation can also feel comfortable. Like this isn't their bad. It's just They don't know what the next stage requires, and the business now has less patience for, like, we can't wait for them to earn that experience over the next 3 to 5 years. Like, we got to be moving faster, and
Yeah.
just don't have the runway to be able to do that. So
Yeah, because
yeah,
that number, that wall is very real,
yeah,
and that's what you. There's not any denying that, and so fixing that immediately is the most important thing, honestly.
yeah,
More
yeah.
important than
Well,
all of our.
Ian,
Yeah.
I got to hand it to you for raising an issue that's hard for people to wrestle with and talk about. Hopefully, some of this has been useful as you think about the best way forward in your situations. But I appreciate you bringing it, because there are many other business owners wrestling with similar topics like that. Okay, Ian, if people want to learn more about Conduit or connect with you online, how would they do that?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Ian, Ian Hoppe, Hoppe. There's only like 3 of us in the whole world, so you can find me. And then you can visit Conduit at Condoit, Condoit.io.
All right, very good. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you again for bringing your real lessons and your real challenges. A lot of people will benefit from the time that you spent. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Brett.
All right, for everyone listening, please like, share, review, comment, do all those things to get this episode in front of as many 7-figure business owners as possible. We're trying to help get these real conversations with real owners dealing with real challenges, sharing real lessons. We want to get that in front of as many business owners as possible, trying to help you along in your 7-figure journey. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.